For that time, talking about crowdfunding, we have a really great panel, and I'm just going to make an introduction here. So we have Miret Zaki, the editor and founder by Bilan Media. Great, thanks for being here. A great media support that we give to here in Geneva. The other panel is Guillaume Barazon. Welcome, Vice President of Geneva. There's no president. No president. Okay. All right. So I come from a country where we have president and we have vice president. So, all right. Welcome. Thanks for being here. We have Andrea Pages from Swisscom, Julien Pachet, and of course we have Olivier Colombin. Welcome. Thanks for coming in. Please, stage is yours.
Thank you for having us here. Now, may I present maybe the panelists first before we start? Guillaume Barazon was admitted in 2008 to the Geneva bar, and he practiced as a lawyer until 2012 at law firms Lenz and Stellin and then Schellenberg Wittmer. On November 2012, he was elected to the government of the city of Geneva as vice mayor, ending 20 years of absence of the Christian Democratic Party. So congratulations. He presides over the Department for Urban Environment and Security. In 2013, he was elected to the Swiss Parliament, where he is a member of the Legal Affairs Committee. So here we have, on the political regulatory side, Guillaume Barazon. Then on the banking side, Olivier Colombin. He's a Geneva banker, also untypical, if I may say. You'll see why, because he likes crowdfunding, actually. He's one of the few. He joined the private bank Darrier Hensch in '87, and then later he became a capital partner of Lombard Odier after Darrier and Lombard merged in 2002. Olivier founded the emerging platform within Lombard Odier. It is a B2B social network for independent asset managers, which is extremely innovative. He has organized the first 100% online financial fair in 3D, which was called a virtual fin fair. He does this every year, which makes him quite a futuristic banker for Geneva. And then we have on the consulting IT side, technological side, Andreas Pages. He's responsible for the development of crowdfunding within Swisscom. Swisscom enables clients, mainly banks, to get a foothold within the crowdfunding market by providing a software as a service, white-labeled solution, and additional services around crowdfunding. Andreas Pages has 10 years of working experience as consultant, mainly with Deloitte and Capgemini. And then we have Julien Pache, quite known here in Swiss Romande. He's managing partner and COO at Investire.ch, a leading Swiss online venture capital platform. At Investire, Julien is in charge of finding promising startups, as well as developing and implementing new products and services for Investire's online community. Since 2010, over 30 startups have used Investire to raise funds from private investors with industry expertise and network. Julien has been following the crowdfunding market closely for the last 4 years to capture the challenges and opportunities of this new industry. Thank you for being here. So the title is the Crowds, the Future of Finance. Since crowdfunding is still very small in Switzerland, may I start by asking you, very generally speaking, how is crowdfunding changing the financial landscape in Europe and in Switzerland? Maybe Julien to start.
Hi. I think it's changing in these different forms. If I take crowd investing, equity based, we are trying to bring private investor to invest in startup. There was a market that was not accessible before to private investor. We try to match them to bring smartness. I think new source of capital, or we try to mobilize capital from private investors in startup, in the lending industry. As the introduction said it, today it's hard to get a loan with a bank because you have to show that you have enough money to pay it back. So these new lending platforms are enabling SMEs and others to actually come to get money. And I think there is as well these initiatives from Swisscom. They are technology providers for bigger banks that will enable as well the crowd to start invest on different forms, lending or others.
What we keep hearing is the development of all of this investing and lending activity to small companies, but actually if you look at the figures, it's extremely small. I mean, we're talking about 300 players all over Europe, 3 billion in money, of which 2 billion in lending, of which almost all of it is in the UK. So what's the reality of this?
The reality is, I think there is two main stoppers. First, the first one is regulation. I think the Swiss regulation don't allow to actually have this business model, these platform actually that we don't have the ecosystem that actually enable the newcomers to actually do it. So they have to either do it via a bank or to limit to 20 individuals, which is a stopping problem. In the UK, they have a new law that is actually enabling, plus this incentive scheme. So a lot on the regulation and the state side to help that, and the other one is that I think it's relatively new, and SMEs are not used to go shout out loud, "Oh, we need money. Would like to borrow from individuals." I think a lot of conservative in Switzerland in that respect.
Okay, Guillaume, please. What do you think that the position of the authorities here, the FINMA, for instance, Financial Services Authority, is about crowdfunding?
So do you hear me? Yeah, I think the main problem is that all the Swiss regulation concerning the financial industry was created in the 80s and 90s for a model that is completely changing. So I would say that the UK, they understood that they had to stimulate crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, fintech, innovation, startups, companies, which is not one of the role of the FINMA, the Swiss regulator.
Whose role is it then?
I think it should be the Federal Council or the Parliament should push on it, but it's really hard because in addition to
Make a specific legislation, you mean?
Either specific legislation, but then we take the risk that the legislation, because it's a Swiss culture of a regulation, will be against crowdfunding activities in Switzerland. But I think we should let at least crowdfunding activities be more mature in Switzerland before just stopping any crowdfunding activities. Because now, as soon as you have 20 people, you consider it as a bank or financial intermediaries. You have anti-money laundering laws that prevent you from extremely restrictive. You have to have either an escrow account or a bank, and obviously for each investor you have to check the KYC, the usual thing you have to do as a banker. Obviously, it's not going to work. So I think the Swiss regulation should be really crowdfunding friendly, because it's important for us. It's foster innovation. It reduces the transactional costs, which are still very high in Switzerland, to raise capital. And I think any possibility of raising capital differently and to fill the equity gap, is a good thing.
And lending gap as well. For the small
but I think lending,
companies.
I will say in Switzerland, if you really need money to buy a car, you have providers that can lend you money.
But small companies don't
credits.
get the credit they need from banks, right? Small SMEs don't get funded as much as they would need.
That's true.
Right.
But I would say on consumer credits for individuals, that's I think easier in Switzerland than in maybe other countries.
But there is already some literature in Europe about all this. There is two schools, actually. There is the school the UK school. I think your approach is liberal. It could be closer to the UK, because in the UK, for instance, peer-to-peer lending is not considered as a deposit activity and doesn't require a banking license, whereas in Germany, yes, a banking license is required to do peer-to-peer lending platforms. So there is already, and France is somewhere in the middle, I think more closer to what you say, letting players get more mature and then starting to regulate them from a certain size. So what approach, the UK or German approach really would you
I will
prefer?
go for the UK.
UK is very liberal, even the government is helping platforms very actively, right?
I will go for the UK, sorry.
Yes.
I will go for the UK approach, but you have to take into consideration that the culture of the Swiss regulator is completely different than the one in the UK. So it has nothing to do with crowdfunding.
It's closer to the German as well, actually.
And actually, FINMA has, they published a fact sheet in December 2014, which actually doesn't say that crowdfunding is not allowed, but the conditions are very, very restrictive, so that it's quite difficult to launch
activities.
crowdfunding activities in Switzerland.
Yeah, Julien.
Even I think on Germany, even Germany, we were expecting a very hard low in Germany, but now actually the low that came out in equity crowdfunding, I can tell for lending, are quite permissive. If you're raising less than 2 million, you can do mini IPOs with less transaction cost, less administrative. The prospectus is not as big as it was initially planned, and I tend to believe, that Swiss is very restrictive, but we might look at Europe, what is actually going on in Europe, and try to see, okay, we have to anyway go in that market at some point to reach the critical mass and take that example as well.
Andreas, do you want to
just
comment?
one example might be also Austria. We just recently developed another regulation which might be very interesting. In one way, maybe too restrictive, but in another way, very innovative.
How is? Can you elaborate on that, please?
They actually, from the idea and in order to translate it to a law, this went very quickly, 6 months, something like this, and was driven by the government.
Actually, we don't have in Europe any single platform that is pan-European, because it's still Austrian, German, French, UK specific laws. We don't have any incentive to be pan-European. It's just national platforms, very consolidated, big champions on each market, and very fragmented elsewhere.
To date,
very
the
big
different
players
tried. Some of them in the Cedars in the UK started to, but again, the financial regulation market is country specific. I guess Swiss bank have their own challenges to get the access to financial services across. So you can imagine that platforms as well. So I think it's still very regulation driven and country specific. That's one of the big hurdles.
Why has lending become so important and equity remains so small? It's really lending. The market is all about lending. Right?
Maybe it is because of equity is a little bit more complex in terms of exit and these kind of strategies, which are not as easy to understand if you're not a professional investor. So and lending is straightforward. So you have an exit strategy. You know what you get. You know what you don't get. So this might be one reason.
Olivier, what do you think crowdfunding can do on the Swiss market? You already have a microphone.
No, many things, but the problem I would like to add to what has been said is that the Swiss banking industry is going through a very chaotic period with the banking secrecy disappearing every day. And if you have at the same time very good solutions for bypassing the banking industry on the lending side, it's another part of the whose who's maybe disappearing. So I think part of the problem is that the many banking organizations are worried about the future, their future, and since they are very well connected with administration and the FINMA, maybe it's somehow positive for the whole industry to be quite reluctant to open to new solutions. But the market is there, and It's all about efficiency. And today the market is, in Switzerland at least, is very inefficient in the sense that I'm working with independent portfolio managers and I see how many cash we have on accounts. And we are charging 0.75% for the cash we hold at the Swiss National Bank. And on the other side, you have people looking for investments and innovation and so on. So your major task as a banker being to connect both sides is not realized. So at the end,
how would you remedy this with a platform?
What is very funny today is that the market is finding solutions, finding ways to go around all those existing rules. I'm sure it doesn't exist yet, but there will be hundreds of initiatives that will somehow find the good solution to bypass the system.
And do you think it would be a good thing, for instance, if institutional investors would go to crowdfunding because, I mean, they don't find the returns anywhere else. And crowdfunding, they say that lending can bring you 5 to 15% returns. What do you think, Guillaume, about if Swiss institutional investors were authorized to enter those platforms and get into crowdfunding, crowd lending activities?
Well, maybe I'm not an expert, so on that, I don't have a specific view on that, but I think the first thing we should do in Switzerland is have pension funds allocating at least 1% or half of 1% of the cash to startups, projects, and innovation in Switzerland in general. That will be the first step before even crowdfunding. To be how is the state? I mean, how is all this cash? I mean, is it going to sleep on bank accounts, or are we going to invest in our future? Sorry. And actually, the Swiss Parliament, actually the Senate and the Conseil National, they agreed that this was a good solution. Now we're expecting the Swiss government to come with the implementation of that principle. That would be the
that's
first
what
step.
they're doing in the US, but at a much larger scale. I mean, pension funds and even households are allowed to invest in any amounts in startups, right? So, Andreas.
If I can just add,
Yes.
Crowdfunding is also about innovation and you know, the country and about ideas and invest in these ideas. So another interesting fact is actually we are looking at platforms and at the market within Switzerland itself, but what is actually invested from Swiss people abroad, which is, I guess, it's even larger than what is invested in Switzerland itself. So that is also an interesting fact. Why is that?
Why?
Yeah, it could be. I haven't answered this question myself, but it could be that we don't have the right products, that we don't have the right platforms. Maybe it is too complicated to invest here, but maybe we have the more interesting products abroad. I don't know. It's tricky.
What is the potential of the IT solutions market for crowdfunding, Andreas? What's the potential in Switzerland? In Europe, it's a huge market, right? Platforms, providers.
It is. As you mentioned, we have hundreds of platforms in Europe. In Switzerland, we have about 15.
And softwares players as well are very active.
Exactly. So we see ourselves as one part is the IT service provider, the classical provider, what you would expect with Swisscom. But the other part, and this is what I would like to agree, is it needs someone and something to enable crowdfunding within Switzerland. So it's like we need to speak about it. We need to enable companies or banks
to spread a culture, financial culture of crowdfunding.
It's culture, but one important thing is also trust. So how does it work? What happens if I invest? These kind of things, they need to be answered, and people need to learn.
Well, I must say that this is a real question because in terms of, it's a little bit like Bitcoin. I'm sorry to make this comparison because it's a bit abusive, but I mean, it's very different fields. But I mean, what insurances do you have? What happens in case you cannot, you need to get refunded in case of defaults. All those risks at the time are quite minimized, right, Julia? What do you think?
Minimized
by the player, I mean by the crowdfunding players themselves, I feel.
I think the risk linked to the assets that are proposed will remain. So startups are risky, SMA lending can be risky, but I think the traditional banks have a lot of experience of actually managing these risks. And today, what we see is that a little bit lean back and see what happened, and if something happened, they might jump in. But I think we would gain from both sides, from the newcomers, from new players, or from the banks to actually try to get somewhere a partnership in actually both sides actually bringing the know-how in the crowdfunding and bringing the know-how in the financial industry, which is actually great in Switzerland, to actually have common initiatives. Because I think
you feel banks should be a driver, one of the main drivers, the main driver in this?
Yeah, I think some of them have said that they would, but UBS is opening his blockchain technologies lab in London. Credit Suisse said they will do something, but they did not yet.
But they go where there is already some scale.
Yeah, I guess Swisscom knows that better as having clients, bank clients, but still we feel that it's very defensive. I understand the rationale behind, because
BNP Paribas has their crowdfunding in Paris.
Yes, I think BNP Paribas was doing it.
KBC,
but in Switzerland we would welcome
in Belgium.
Yeah. So I think in Switzerland there is a lot of banks, there is a lot of financial know-how. I think the industry would profit if we could build bridges.
But if you look at the UK example, it's the government really who is forcing to P2P platforms to bring the clients that the banks don't want, to bring them to the P2P platform. They're controlling the whole process, the government. I mean, you have to have a government that is really willing, right, Guillaume? I mean, they have to be voluntary about this, and typically, I mean, the UK government is very active, proactive.
Yeah, you're right, and generally I won't talk only about crowdfunding, but it's creating the ecosystem, the regulatory framework, tax incentives. That's on the federal, national level. Then the cities. We have to create an urban ecosystem for startups, innovation. UBS, as you just mentioned, they funded Lab in Level 39, which is a fintech accelerator. I mean, I'm very sad as a Swiss politician that UBS is not investing, but they might have good reasons, in Zurich or in Geneva. And I think the future of the industry in Switzerland obviously depends on the ability of the market players here, even in private banking, which is very classical industry and so on, to innovate, to create new models, and to have more bridge between. So yes, the city, the country can do something, but then we should maybe just promote, stimulate. Yeah, look at the IP. I mean, the IP box in the UK. Yeah. This was a big push, and it's very important. Now the Germans are contesting. They're saying to the UK, you have to stop it in 2016, 2021. But I mean, we're talking about the IP box in Switzerland, but they have it since many years in the UK, and that's obviously it's an edge.
What if at a certain point the EU makes a European directive? Although it's unlikely at the moment, if you regulate nationally and then there's a European directive that becomes, that becomes the main standard for everyone, as it always is the case. Is it totally unlikely, a crowdfunding directive?
I don't know. I'd ask for bankers more, because they have more experience on financial regulation and how actually the market is organized. But what we see is that all the time is country-specific. UK has a framework, Germany has it. And bad example of actually getting that organized across Europe. I guess it will work, but we're not counting on that on the short term, let's say, or middle term future.
There are some regulations on the EU level, but again, it's difficult if you operate cross country. Then it's getting difficult.
There is no actual cross-border activity, right? Exactly.
Yeah, they have a prospectus initiative, but you have to got it stamped from BaFin, from FSA, from every each. So as a small company, you have no chance with admin costs that are related that you got across Europe.
So what do you think the Swiss and European banking failure to lend really to SMEs will end up still making way for this market, right? Or what were you saying, Olivier?
No, I think it will be a fight.
A fight?
Yes, between the market and the institutions. Because if you look at what is going on with Uber,
Uber.
Yeah.
Good example.
We're
inviting someone from Uber, this panel, who didn't come, actually. I'm sorry to
I never hear anybody
this.
saying that this model is a bad one.
Yes.
I mean, as a user or as an observer. If you're talking to institutions, to the state, or to taxi drivers, former taxi driver, they all consider that it's a threat for their activity. So, and how does it? How do we manage that? I haven't seen any supportive approach from everyone saying, "Wow, there is a solution coming up, and then we have to support it." First, it starts with a fight and resistance, then a fight, and then at the end, we find a solution. So I do believe that in the banking industry, it will be somehow the same, because it's so disruptive that it is a real threat for the industry.
But you know, maybe you have noticed this as well. The banks are really now not in the most mature market like the UK. They're really taking the front seat on the crowdfunding market. Really, they are the market makers, the intermediaries. I mean, when I hear that now you have a platform that will allocate a tranches of credit to a bank that's going to redistribute this to end clients. It reminds me of something. I don't know if it does remind you of those bundles of loans, you know, rings a bell maybe, that are packaged by banks in order to make things easier for the crowdfunding platforms, right? And then they are just selling them to final clients who don't know exactly what they're buying, although it's supposed to be rated by quality of credit. But you know, it makes me a little bit nervous to hear that.
Me too, actually. I think it was an article in Bloomberg last week about the big institutional investor investing via peer-to-peer lending club in the US, where they are securitizing all this loan
They're
packaging.
no longer calling it peer-to-peer, by the way, right? It's no longer peer-to-peer.
It's normal. It's normal lending.
There's no peers here, you know.
I don't think it's worse than the mass amount of credit card loans that are already securitized. From, I think we're talking about a market size that is not going to shake the industry at all if it blows up. If it doesn't have to blow up.
Credit cards is 2 trillion, and here we're talking a few billions.
Yes.
Right?
So I think, and that was funny to see that Wall Street bankers are worried about this new industry. I think it's just new. The only worrying about is new, is not about the asset class, because you were to blow up would still be irrelevant compared to the other type of lending, I think.
Exactly, but I mean the model is evolving towards a form of investment banking. What do you think, Olivier? It's really investment banking that is done outside of banks, so that it looks more cool and sympathetic and nice, or friendly, or what is it exactly? I mean, this very recent evolution of crowdfunding towards this syndication of loans and looks very much like what Goldman Sachs does, I mean, or Bank of America, I mean.
Yes, that's and those two approaches can live together.
They can even converge, yes, because it's the same players at the end. I mean, they take
probably.
Yeah. How do you think there are risks here, or?
risk that it happens.
A subprime sort of risk of the same kind, like you start creating enormous amounts of lending volume.
Can't be
you
worse.
don't look at the quality.
Can't be worse, at least.
It can't be worse, okay. Hope you're right, huh?
I don't know.
I think as long as it doesn't incentivize individual to go actually lend, to actually cross finance their already credit card loans via lending to individuals and actually increasing the mass of private debts, I think that would be worrying from a whole market.
Maybe we're getting there actually, because if
yes, I think sometimes we are, but I think it wouldn't be that a global scene a good thing if we would incentivize this kind of thing.
But for banks, it's also like getting experience, right? Getting into the market. No one can really say what is in 3 years, 5 years time with crowdfunding, how it will evolve. So it's really like getting experience in it. Maybe the product changes, maybe the customer changes, but it's really like the question is being in there or not. That is really the question.
That's right. And just because all banks judged that they wanted to have a foot in this, I mean, it is getting institutionalized very quickly, much quicker than anyone has thought. So what do I do if I want to go back to the early peer-to-peer model? Well, where do I find that? I mean, does it still exist? Can it coexist with very sophisticated platforms? Julien?
So you mean the way that individual
Can
were
you
actually...
have peer-to-peer platforms, a very early model of crowdfunding where really an individual lends to another individual and you finance your project, etc., like it was conceived at the start, coexisting next to the platforms we have now in the UK and Germany and Holland, where it's really banks organizing the whole volume of transactions.
I think it's still possible because there is a lot of new platforms addressing niche. I think a couple launched.
Niche is the word, yes.
Niche market. A couple of them launched this year, still in Switzerland. So it is still possible. Then the question comes: are these players sustainable as well? Because you need to drive some volumes. Of course, lending clubs or lending circle, they got the volumes to have actually a profitable business model or come close to it. If you don't get these volumes, so you have to make money as platform.
Right. You need scale. That definitely, yes.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So it's like not every bank goes into crowdfunding. So first of all, so the second is then hopefully they both models will still coexist. Because there's plenty of space. Even the business model is a little bit different, for a bank as it is for a startup when they go into crowdfunding and open their own platform. So it's a little bit different, and they both can still coexist. Absolutely.
And that's why we should, from a regulatory point of view, have the liberal approach, because otherwise, if only UBS or big banks, because they are authorized as banks and supervised by the FINMA, they can freely act as crowdfunding players in Switzerland, then you have a risk. So that's why I'm for a more liberal approach, because it's foster innovation, even within the scope of crowdfunding, the crowdfunding bubble. Bubble is maybe not the right term, but let's say...
boom, maybe, hopefully,
Maybe one positive point, maybe for banks is that today large banking organizations are mostly managing risk. That's what they are doing every day. And maybe crowdfunding could be a solution for transferring part of the risk on the end user and end lender and end client. And at the end of the day, it could be a good balance for the whole industry to have this shifting, yes.
Or more widely spreading risk.
But the risks still exist.
They still exist, right. Thank you, all the panelists. Now I suggest we have already done, a quarter of an hour or more. Can we have a few questions and answers with the room? Who wants to react, comment? Sir, yeah, there's maybe the microphone. Thank you.
Yes, many thanks. We heard a lot, the debate was a lot focused on crowdfunding, and I was wondering to which extent we could hear a few views on crowdsourcing of business intelligence. Because in terms of the gentleman, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, from the banking sector.
Olivier Colombin.
Many thanks, from Olivier Colombin. I think the vital point is indeed about risk. And today, banks tend to source their business intelligence from a few central points, a few central hubs of consultants' pools. And the question is to which extent they could also source their business intelligence from a crowdsourcing system, especially for new emerging markets, where the specialists are not necessarily within those hubs. So this is my question.
Julien, Olivier, who wants?
Well, I can talk about my personal experience in a very old private bank here in Geneva, and I must say that there is a quite important resistance to this type of approach, because most of the bankers do think they know what their clients need, and they do not benefit from their feedbacks or from their initiatives. But they don't ask them for any intelligence. So one of my partners told me quite recently, Olivier, why should our clients talk together today? Ask me that. So I realized that we were far away from our understanding of what is going on the planet today. But so my answer is, and I think is representing a quite important part of those who are driving in the driving seats today. Mm-hmm. So if you really want to do that, I think you have to do it externally. And excuse me if I talk about me, but I'm just leaving my position at the end of the month because I want to organize that outside of the bank, because I have an eye on what is going on inside, not on the organization in the organization, but among the clients. And I think it will be easier to have this exchange of ideas and intelligence with the end clients outside of the institutions than by remaining inside.
Centralized type of.
Theoretically, you're right, and they all should do that. And we have had some other example here today that show that it's a great advantage for an institution to have this type of approach. But I think it's going to be quite difficult in Switzerland.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Olivier.
I may be wrong.
Other questions, please, or remarks? This side. Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for that very interesting insights. Now I'm speaking as one of the guys sitting in the stakeholder forum at the European Commission for Crowdfunding.
Oh.
And I was wondering, if you heard about the Denmark initiative, where I think it's a very good example where a political party combined with banking in terms of risk management and the crowd can work together. So they basically use a crowd to get a certain amount of money, and then the state itself gives the same amount of money as a tender, not as a loan, and then the bank values that as a low-risk investment and gives a perfect credit to that party. And I think that'll be an interesting thing to
Absolutely.
Talk about and hear about what your opinion about that one is. It's a European initiative.
Very innovative. What do you think? We never had that. here.
Didn't know
We
about
had
that, but
public-private partnerships, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think it's a great initiatives, but I don't know what the position of the traditional politics would be in Switzerland, and the transparency in the financing of politics in Switzerland is sometimes a topic. I think we have a heavier tradition here in Switzerland and different views on it, but I think it's a very, very valid model.
And sir, what is the incentive for banks in this? I'm not sure. Can you explain to us?
Interestingly, in time, the banks came in later because they realized that it is saving them money in a risk evaluation process. And then they have a chance to have a low risk investment. So they really came more from the opportunity angle and used it as a risk, maybe also prediction mechanism.
Do they consider it like sort of a public loan that is, a private loan backed by the public institutions? I mean, state-backed, a private loan backed by the government. Is that how the banks view this?
Yeah, I think initially they see the crowd really as a validator for a concept, and then the public uses that as an initiative to bring cheap money to additional sources, which were not able prior to get that money through that certain amount of cost.
See, when you want to really innovate, you have the politicians, the banks, and the crowd being partners together, which we don't have in Switzerland. So thank you for this example. Another comment, maybe, or questions, or yes. Hi. Yes.
Thank you. A question for Julien. From a regulation point of view, would it be easier for your company to be registered outside Switzerland to serve the Swiss market?
Yeah, like funds, mutual funds are doing this, right?
We have, I think today we started the business in Switzerland, and to date we didn't actually think about delocalizing outside Switzerland to actually cross for the moment. As I said before, there is some legislation, UK, now Germany even coming, that would be actually more interesting and helping our investor clients and startup clients to have a bigger reach. It's not the case in Switzerland, but that doesn't mean that we will move the seat. But of course, we will monitor what is going on, and we are really seeking and supporting a change in the regulation in Switzerland.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes. Okay, thank you. On the center.
Regarding the Swisscom, I would be interested to hear a little bit more about the white label crowdfunding platform you're providing. I mean, regarding the solution you're providing, is it a complete ecosystem, B2B only, or also a model that you provide to eventually to a startup who would like to provide an equity-based, another model than equity, because I understood it's quite difficult in Switzerland.
Thanks for the question. I get this question a lot, actually, but it's a B2B business. It's only B2B for the moment. So the type of model we provide.
Regarding the solution, do you provide the full ecosystem? Is it developed by Swisscom?
Yes, it is, but it depends on what you mean by full ecosystem. But I have a presentation.
Okay.
Just in I don't know, an hour. So if you have time, then we can discuss it later on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, the risk finance, of course, it is the main challenge for SMEs and companies. And when we talk about crowdfunding, which is part of crowdsourcing, it is mainly nowadays focusing on innovations. nowadays, innovation, we are living new area of new technologies, which is not highest technologies, new technologies, and crowdfunding is a tool to invest. Because fund, to implement fund, it is political initiative, it could be. Did you see crowdfunding trademarks? You see small R? Do you see a Swisscom provider? Your competitor, Orange, is not anymore Orange, it's Salt. It's not
Salt, yeah.
Salt. It's not a name, it's a trademark. But what happened? I don't know if the Danish initiative on the European level, it's as well the European level, which is fusion between French company Alcatel and another company from Finland. Do you see what happened recently? I see that. I am observer, yes, observer, an active observer. I try to just to conclude my intervention on one word, which is the future of crowdfunding are nowadays innovations, because many opportunities to invest, and we should have also crowdfunding opportunities everywhere. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This, maybe a last question here on the back of the room, please.
Exercise.
We don't have something like the Swiss Crowdfunding Association, right? Who is going to create it? Someone interested here? Yeah. If you want to start something, maybe Olivier, maybe after.
Can create a social network based on that.
Excellent.
No association.
Okay.
Well, in the absence of a crowdfunding association, I have a question for you. Yeah, the elephant in the room here is that entrepreneurs, at least the ones I talk to, tend to want to use crowdfunding or crowd equity systems to bypass the traditional banks and the VCs. Now, partly that is because they want to maintain control of the companies for the social or environmental aims that they put into them, and partly it's also because they think that crowdfunding is a far more democratic way of decision making of what a society invests in. So, what makes you guys think that you have a place in the future with this? And regulation, I'm afraid, sounds like every other industry that is being out-evolved and goes, oh, I'll come and ask the politicians to regulate in favor of me so I stay alive.
That's the early spirit of crowdfunding, see? I had almost forgotten it.
He's still around.
Yeah. So what makes you think you have a place in this crowdfunding democratic adventure? Are you worth this very idealistic initiative?
It's probably difficult to answer, but as I said, it's first of all, I believe both can coexist. So both models. So in terms of working with a bank or without a bank, the real question and the real it still works the same, right? Even if a bank is behind. So is crowdfunding is one project, many support a project. So, and that should be still the same model. As soon as this...
The point is important here because regulation will be tailored for one of the two. It can be, we can't have regulation for every size and every shape. So if it's the regulation ends up being more favorable for the biggest institutions, the more institutionalized, the most sophisticated, it will be unfavorable for the smaller players.
It is already the case.
The more alternative
today.
It is already.
It is the case today, actually.
See.
So and it can only be. I think if regulation changes, it may have some advantage, right? So that is what we are hoping for. So.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I understand correctly, your question was what drives the innovation is that democratization drives what should be funded or not, right? I think it's still the case today. If you look at Kickstarter's other models, you need to convince that you have enough customers to buy it. So they are in a driving seat of if you're not going to be funded or not. And in other models, in equity as well, we try to leverage the community and get signals to what they think could be an interesting company to fund. So I think the spirit is hopefully not lost and will not be.
Hopefully. On this note of hope, shall we close the panel?
Give a great applause to a great panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for,
Thanks for all
thank you
panelists.
for being here and sharing your wisdom. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.